everyone, my name is Gabby and today I'm going to be bringing you my November wrap-up. So as of right now when I'm filming this video, there is a week until Christmas Eve and I'm just filming my November wrap-up. And this isn't because I haven't filmed my November wrap-up before. I filmed it a few weeks ago. Of course, I've been incredibly busy with the semester winding down and taking some of my last quizzes and tests of the year and preparing for final exams, so I don't get a lot of time to film. I did get an opportunity to film my November wrap-up and I go to edit it now a few weeks later once I get an opportunity and there's no audio. This normally doesn't happen. Most of my videos are usually really good. I usually have no issues. I go and do some problem solving and I realize that the only reason why I didn't have any audio is because one end of my mic was not plugged in. So that one simple issue ruined over a half an hour worth of footage, and so now I have to refilm. So I apologize if this is coming to you a lot later than I would like it to. Being incredibly busy, of course, always ruins my uploading schedule because when November, December comes around, it doesn't happen. I don't get time to film. But when I do have opportunities to film, I would like to be able to get to use the footage that I have, but that couldn't happen. So I have some reads to discuss for you. In November, I have some shows and movies that I've been watching in October and November that I didn't get to discuss with you. So we're gonna dive right in and discuss my reads and watches for October and November. My October wrap-up will be linked down below. I already discussed my reads for October, but because that video was really long, I didn't get to discuss any of my watches, so I'm going to be combining that into this wrap-up, if that makes sense. So now that all of that is out of the way, we're gonna dive right in and discuss my reads for November. So my first read of the month was A Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. I read this about 11 hours before going and seeing the film. I picked it up on Thursday night before the movie came out, and I bought the book on my Kindle because I'd been dying to read this book the minute that I saw the trailer, because I saw this huge all-star cast with a whole bunch of names, and then immediately drew me to want to read this book before going and seeing the movie. I've known about Agatha Christie since about 7th grade because my friends that were in regular English classes read and then there were none. I never got the opportunity to read that book because I was in honors classes and I just never picked it up for my own enjoyment. But now that this movie was coming out, I had a reason to read an Agatha Christie novel, so by God was I going to do it. And it got to the Thursday night before the movie was coming out and I still hadn't read it. So I immediately made the decision, I'm buying the book on my Kindle and I'm going to read it. And having that Friday off because of Veterans Day, I accomplished my goal. I got to buy the book Thursday night. I brought my Kindle with me to my National Honor Society induction and I read it while I was waiting for the ceremony to start. Stayed up till about 12, 1 in the morning reading halfway through the book, and then Friday morning woke up and finished the other half of the book and went and saw the movie Friday night. So I definitely think that I enjoyed my experience reading this book just because I really don't get a lot of times to binge read through a novel and get to just immerse myself and read the book mostly in one sitting. I'm just so busy and I'm constantly having to read books like about 50 pages to 100 pages a day, and I don't get a lot of time to just fully immerse myself into one book. It definitely helps that this one is shorter because it made it easier to get through, but still, the time that I get to read a novel in one sitting is very, very, very limited. So I enjoyed my experience with that, and then immediately getting to go and see the movie, I had ideas fresh in my mind I wanted to get to see on screen. So that was also really helpful too, and I just had a really amazing experience getting to read this book, and it made my enjoyment of the story and the adaptation so much more worthwhile because I was able to have the reading experience that I did. So talking about the book, I definitely think that Agatha Christie is a masterful storyteller. I love how she takes all these little clues and bits and pieces and hints at them throughout the entire story, and you're left wondering how do they culminate into this final picture and this final story and this final mystery and to what happened, and you get this beautiful reveal at the end where all these pieces come together to tell your big picture and reveal this mystery and what it is that happened between these sets of characters, and it's so interesting and compelling, and it's amazing how all these things come together and seeing them hinted throughout the entire story. It just builds up so much suspense, and Agatha Christie is a masterful crafter of suspense within this novel because you're constantly guessing and wondering who it is that's involved and what it is that's really going down and how all these clues and bits and pieces play into the storyline, and it's all developed beautifully. But that is the one thing that the movie adaptation ruined that I really, really loved about this book. Because of time's sake, I would assume the minute that you get a clue, immediately it's revealed how it plays into the storyline, and it just ruins all the suspense that you get from the novel, and it just felt like the story overall was really rushed and like they were trying to get to this end point, and it didn't seem like they were trying to build it out and be suspenseful like a murder mystery is supposed to be. So it lacked that element that I feel like it really needed to be a successful storyline, and if it had that element, I feel like it would have made the movie so much more enjoyable because there were a lot of tiny little issues that I had with the movie adaptation. Overall, I would probably rate Murder on the Orient Express a solid B, and that's talking about the movie adaptation. The book I really enjoyed, but the movie adaptation just had lots of tiny little issues here and there that just kind of ruined my experience seeing it. And of course, having the book fresh in my mind, I was much more in tune and key to what these issues were going to be, but still they were there and they were present nonetheless. And with this being a really classic story and having to undertake the task of having to retell a story that's been told so many times over, you have to be able to nail these really simple things, and if you can't do that, it's not going to be a very successful adaptation. So one of the things that immediately drew me to this film, and one of the reasons why I ultimately picked up the book, was because of this all-star cast. You have Leslie Odom Jr., Josh Gad, Daisy Ridley, Penelope Cruz, Willem Dafoe, Kenneth Branagh, Judi Dench. The list could go on. All these really huge names in the entertainment industry, new and old, all coming together to tell this really classic mystery. You would think with that type of all-star cast, you're not gonna have to worry about acting being an issue, but no. Honestly, for me, I feel like when I went and I watched this film, there was just some weird underlying tension that I couldn't describe. I don't know if it was just because all the other actors wanted to compete with each other because there's this big cast of people and they all sort of want to prove themselves, and because they all have smaller parts, they want to be able to make use out of the time that they have, but it just felt stilted. I can't describe it, but I feel like if you go and see the film for yourself, you'll understand it, but it wasn't there for me. And I was trying to describe this to my parents, and sort of what my dad helped me realize is that this was possibly Kenneth Branagh. He plays Hercule Poirot, who is our lead character, and he has this entire series roped around him where he's the lead, he's the detective, and he's going around and solving all these different mysteries, and he's supposed to be a renowned detective. So because his character is a little bit eccentric, Kenneth Branagh sort of plays on that a little bit to the point where he maybe outshines everyone else because they do have smaller parts. And my father compared that a little bit to his role in A Much Ado About Nothing, which is a Shakespeare play. I read that in 8th grade, so I immediately knew what he was talking about because we watched that adaptation in class, and it just did, yeah, feel like that same vibe, because in A Much Ado About Nothing, you do have a big cast of characters, new and old, some actors that were emerging into the field and others that have been known for a pretty long period of time. All of their performances felt slightly stilted because Kenneth Branagh just has this way of like stealing the screen with a Shakespeare-y like air. I can't describe it, but I think that it was just potentially him being at the front of this and having a role that is a little bit more odd and eccentric that could fit into like that Shakespeare-like category. He just fell into that position, and also the fact that he's producing this movie and he's directing it and he's starring it, that has this project that's his, that naturally he's gonna domineer over it. I don't know if that was an issue at all, but the acting just felt stilted to me. Other things. There were some weird angles. I think they were interesting and artistic, but like uncomfortable at times. The wide overarching establishing shots where you get to see like mountain ranges and snow, all of that really beautiful, but the tiny little intimate shots between characters was just strange. And I understand that you're like crammed into a little train compartment and you're trying to possibly emulate that vibe, but I wasn't feeling it. There's weird shots where you're like staring down at characters' foreheads for an entire scene, and I just don't know how I felt about it. Part of me was like, this is really uncomfortable. Why am I staring at someone's forehead? I want to see their faces and their reactions to what it is that's going on, not their hairline. But it was interesting to say the least, but I don't think that it was effective in telling the storyline. There were some character changes that were made that I feel like were possibly ineffective. They changed Leslie Odom Jr.'s character, who was originally just a colonel, and they made him a doctor, and the doctor is a separate character, and I think one of the things that's so important about that is that his diagnosis of the body is immediately valid because you know that he's not involved in this mystery at all. So to make Leslie Odom Jr.'s character the doctor sort of invalidates anything that he could possibly say about the body because he's immediately a suspect, and I just felt like that was weird, and I just didn't like what they did with his character. I like Leslie Odom Jr., but I just feel like the sort of direction they took his character in, I wasn't too happy with. One of the things that I did enjoy about this film was Josh Gad. He gets to play a more serious role, and he gets to prove himself so much, and I loved it. One of the things about Josh Gad that I feel like a lot of people have just come to know him for is his comedic roles, and that he's sort of been typecasted into that type of role. This film was great in the fact that it still fits that for him, but he's able to play a more serious role and he's able to step outside of his comfort zone a little bit, and he proved himself. And I love seeing typecasted actors being able to step outside of their comfort zones and actually be successful and not just have to stick with the same roles that they've been playing, whether it be like the comedy role or the villain or the superhero. Getting to see an actor do something different and be able to achieve success in that new role is something I always love seeing, and Josh Gad definitely did that for me in this film, and I definitely think that he is completely entirely underappreciated as an actor, and I adored seeing him on screen. One last thing, because I've been rambling about this adaptation for way too long, but I had so many thoughts that this could have technically been its own review, to be honest. There were some action scenes that were in this movie that I felt were kind of unnecessary. I just don't know what it is for me, but I just didn't really like them. I thought that they were really weird and just awkwardly placed into the story. I don't know if it was just trying to like add a new element to make something different and to make it more interesting and more suspenseful, because they were lacking suspense from the actual plot line. It wasn't there for me. It just felt oddly placed. So overall, like I said, I would give Murder on the Orient Express a solid B. I enjoyed it. Maybe if I watched it again, I would get more into it. I'd be able to excuse some of the issues that I had with the movie. It was enjoyable, but like I just did have lots of minor problems with it here and there. So moving on, my next read of the month was Zenith by Sasha Alsberg and Lindsay Cummings. This book comes out January 16th, 2018. I am going to be at the launch party for Zenith at Anderson's in LaGrange with a whole bunch of other booktubers that I've talked to that said that they're most likely going to be there, so it's going to be a huge booktube celebration. I'm so excited to get to celebrate the release of this wonderful work with Sasha and Lindsay. This book is absolutely fantastic. I was so amazed by it. I love how all of the characters are really well developed and the world is really well developed. It's just so compelling and so interesting, and the minute that I closed this book, I felt like hurtling it across the room because it was just so intense and so many crazy things that went down, and I'm so angry at Sasha and Lindsay, but I'm so excited to see what they do with this world because this first book was absolutely phenomenal. So I've been talking about this book a lot the past few months. I got an ARC because I traded with someone, and I'm very, very happy that I did because I've been wanting to get my hands on this book forever, and I'm just so happy that I was able to read it this month because the minute that I got it in my hands, I knew that I wanted to read it, and I had the best time devouring this world. This story is a multi-point of view space novel, YA, sci-fi, yeah, and we follow primarily our main character Androma, and she is the head of a group of female space pirates that orbit the galaxy in their ship called the Marauder. And so they're just kind of minding their own business, doing what space pirates do when they end up getting attacked by a whole bunch of enemy ships that are headed by Androma's ex-boyfriend Dex. And so when the two of them reunite, they have to confront their past while teaming up together on a mission that majorly confronts Androma's past and a big, huge issue that she has in her childhood that's now being brought back to life in her present, and her having to deal with that while a civil war or a world war, a planet war, could possibly be looming with some villains that are doing some very shady things off in another planet, galaxy. That was a rough synopsis. There's just a lot that goes on in this book, and honestly, you have to read it, and the more that you read it, just the more you get immersed in the world and all the crazy things that are going down. It's so well developed. All the characters are very unique and have their own unique perspectives, which is one of the things that I appreciate. It doesn't feel like all the characters are very similar. They're all very, very, very distinct, and their culture is very distinct. There's also a lot of development with like food and weapons and the world, and each planet or galaxy sort of has its own culture, and I just really appreciated that because it makes the world feel so much more well developed and so much more immersive. So there's a lot of really wonderful things to love about this book. I really hope that you guys all go and pick it up when it comes out in January. It was one of my most anticipated releases for 2018, so to get my hands on it early was very, very exciting, and I'm so glad that I got the opportunity to pick this book up. It was absolutely amazing, and Sasha and Lindsay blew me out of the water. My next book that I read this month was Wonder Woman Warbringer by Leigh Bardugo. This is another book that I was talking about last month that I really enjoyed. I definitely didn't know what to expect from this book because it felt very different from Leigh Bardugo and what I'm used to reading from her, because it definitely felt it was going to be like a more contemporary world, but I was impressed because Leigh Bardugo is amazing and she's constantly able to blow my mind. This story follows, of course, Diana, our Wonder Woman, and she ends up coming across one of our main characters, Alaya. Diana ends up finding out that Alaya is a warbringer. She is a descendant of Helen of Troy, and so now pretty much wherever she goes, she's destined to bring war and chaos. So with a possible World War III looming, Diana and Alaya have to team up to break the warbringer line and prevent prevent the destruction of the world. So this story is incredibly epic, which is the exact thing that Leigh Bardugo knows how to do. I think in writing this book, because it definitely was going to be different than a lot of things that she's written before, Leigh Bardugo took all of her natural strengths in writing really badass action scenes and fight sequences and crazy plot twists, and taking a really great group of main characters that are diverse, that have a lot of really unique personalities, that are all very well developed and each very distinct. She took all of those strengths and put that into this novel, and then sort of worked around the things that she may not be more comfortable with, like telling a more contemporary-like story with some sort of like mythology elements to it, and then also having to fit in the Wonder Woman storyline and all of the background information that needs to be brought into this book to make it feel like a solid adaptation. I think she did an amazing job. I was so impressed. This book definitely does have a slow build, but I think I appreciated it because once you get to that climactic point, everything just starts rolling and you're turning the pages, waiting to find out what's going to happen next because there's so many crazy things that are going down. So the build-up is nice because it doesn't feel like there's all this stuff going on throughout the entire book, but it builds up, and once you reach that climactic point, that's when you want to keep turning the pages. So it has a nice build to it, which I appreciated, because sometimes there's books that can't do that, and Leigh Bardugo is just masterful when it comes to telling those storylines and letting them have a nice slow build to them. Of course, I loved all the characters. I think that was my favorite thing coming out of this book, was just the really great group of diverse characters. Each character is very unique and very different from one another, and they're all so beautifully developed. You fall in love with each and every single character, and you question each and every single character and sort of wonder what it is that's going on inside their head. Not every single character is trustworthy, I will tell you that much. There's a lot of surprises and twists and turns that you're not going to expect from this book that Leigh Bardugo did an amazing job crafting. And as for me, I'm not someone who grew up with superheroes or Wonder Woman or Superman or Batman or whatever, but this story blew me out of the water and I absolutely loved it, even not being a superhero fan. So I would definitely recommend this to anyone, especially if you're a Leigh Bardugo fan, because she just takes everything that she's able to do well and crafts it into this amazing novel, and I'm so glad that I got the opportunity to pick it up. Leigh Bardugo is phenomenal and I absolutely love everything that she has written. She's just a masterful author, and I'm so glad I got the opportunity to pick this book up this month. So the next read of the month is You in 5 Acts by Una LaMarche. So I reviewed this book for Teen Reads, and my review was relatively long and pretty much culminates all of my thoughts and opinions into it, and that review is up on their website now, so if you want to go and check it out, I will have it linked down below. I just think that it's more worth it for you to read that review than for me to sit here and blab on about it more, because this video is already getting really long. So check out that review if you want to find out my thoughts on You in 5 Acts. Quick little teaser. I really enjoyed it. And so my final read of the month was Dear Evan Hansen, Through the Window by Stephen Levinson, Benj Pasek, and Justin Paul. So this is the companion novel to the Dear Evan Hansen musical on Broadway, and it tells the story from the minute that the story was conceived to all the changes that had to be made for it to reach its final product to being a Tony Award winning musical with so much success. I loved this book, being someone who's been really touched by Dear Evan Hansen and how the story has completely changed my life over this past year. I was so excited to hear that this book was coming out. I immediately had to pre-order it, and I got my hands on it the day that it came out, and I started paging through all the gorgeous pictures and the annotated libretto with notes from Stephen, Benj, and Justin about each of like the lines and the lyrics and the different parts that go into telling the story, and it was just so interesting to read. I loved seeing how the musical developed, because there were times where I was looking at some of the ideas that they had for the original product and thinking that could never work. How is it that that was like a feasible idea? But actually, if anything, looking at that, it made me so much more impressed, because it wasn't a story that just came together and was just perfect. It took lots of time and development and changes and several different actors coming into roles to get a nice fit and to have this flawless product and beautiful product that so many people resonate to that we know today. And I loved getting to see those changes because it just made me appreciate all the work and effort into making the masterpiece that it is today. So one of my favorite things about this book, and I talked about this a little on Twitter because the minute that I found out, I was absolutely freaking. As you guys know, I got to see Dear Evan Hansen in June when I went to New York, and I brought a gift for Will Rowland that I crafted with a whole bunch of fans of his on Tumblr, because I help moderate a Will Rowland Tumblr account called the Will Rowland Hype Squad. If you want to check it out, I'll have it linked down below. I just sort of stumbled my way into that account and became a moderator, and so I was like, you wanna know what? I feel like Will Rowland is one of those those really underappreciated actors in that cast, because you had Ben Platt, who like completely entirely stole the show, and so a lot of these smaller actors aren't getting appreciation. I wanted to do something for him. So I had a whole bunch of fans come and send messages to me of things that they wanted to say to him, something they liked about him, maybe just like a note or something to make him smile. I got over 100 messages from you guys, which was absolutely amazing, and so I sent that, a Great British Bake Off coffee mug that I found on Redbubble, some gummy worms, sent him one of my bookmarks for my channel, and I go and I read this book, and I'm getting towards the end, and there's a picture of Lil Roland here in his dressing room, and there's a jar that is on his desk, and that's the jar that I sent him, and it looks like he's reading a letter, and there's like a box in the corner, and that picture could be the moment that he got my gift and is opening it, and that is forever encapsulated in this book, which is insane, and I'm so incredibly grateful for, because every time I look at this book and I look at this page, that moment is just enshrined forever, and it just makes me feel so completely and entirely gratified, and I'm just so happy that he got the gift, because I never knew if he did, because it was definitely a struggle to get it there. It makes me so happy looking at this book and all of the beautiful pictures throughout it and the beautiful blue pages, and I love it so much. And it's sort of one of the things that I love about the Hamiltome is all the beautiful pictures and seeing how everything came together in reading the annotated libretto and seeing all the different little unique pieces that go into crafting the story and getting to hear the sort of author's commentary on it. This book is gorgeous. I love Broadway companion books like this just because it's so much fun to get to immerse yourself in the story so much more, especially if you're a huge Broadway fan like I am. So I'm so glad that I was able to pick this book up this month, and it was definitely a very amazing and gratifying read.